I feel like I need to rewatch this entire season just so that I can pinpoint the exact moment when it decided to just go off the rails. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. The final episode of Reacher is here. I did not do a video about episode 7 called The Man Goes Through um, because of life. Where I record, some isolation had to happen, and I couldn't get to the room to actually do the video. But I will touch a little bit about that because I hated the episode. I'm just going to be honest. The penultimate episode of Reacher season 2, I did not like at all. Compared to episode 6, which I really thought was the best, the strongest episode they had of the year. Episode 7, I need to touch on a little bit because it sort of bled into why I didn't care much for episode 8, the finale as well. Episode 7 was the first time that there were multiple things in an episode that occurred that I was like, well, this just doesn't make sense. This had occurred before in the season, namely when the Homeland Security folks just let Reacher walk out the building after saying he was going to murder someone. They're like, that's so Reacher. Like, it's almost like a comedy sketch. Like, oh, that Reacher being Reacher again. And there's no sort of consequences to it. No one like, so you're just going to let this big brute just roam around and no one's taking sort of the piss out of him. Um, and so in episode 7, there's so many things that just occur. One of them is that Dixon and OD send Marlo and her daughter off. My brain was like, hey, it would make sense if they follow suit, they follow with him, and or that one of them take drop her off at the location. And so what happens at the beginning of the episode is there's such a quick dialogue between Dixon and Reacher to just come up with a person like, I knew somebody back then, blah 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 blah, yada yada yada, all just done for the script. Like nothing has ever been brought up about this person. It's like, nope, I got somebody that will never talked about on screen before, and it'll be safe to take them back. And I won't even take them back because the plot tells us that we need to get caught by the end of this episode. We're going to send them on and let that be. And my brain is for this team, I would have assumed and believed that everything in me would have been like someone would have made sure that Marlo got to the secure point. That's a piece of it. Then we have them going to check on and get questioning from the person that killed Russo. So they go to the hospital and they're wearing hospital gowns. Now, Reacher sticks out like a sore thumb. You see a big tree trunk walking through the hospital. You're like, well, when the hell did we order a doctor or a nurse who looks like Triple H walking through the middle of the hospital? But my other thing is this person killed a cop. At the very least, his room's going to be heavily guarded. Like I would assume that his room would be heavily guarded out of a protection for him, and two, because the other police officers, although a lot of the police officers in this town are on the take, but to be like, hey, we can't have, we want him to survive and live so that we can take him to trial. Neither here nor there. They don't. He dies. They move on. Everything in this season is very simple and easy for Reacher and his team. And nothing feels like there's really any weight or stakes or any danger that it could ever come to these guys. Unlike at season 1, where it felt like we were leading to things, felt like there was a more of a detective piece of it, and things of danger and problem and troubles actually were coming and had some sort of weight to it. Whereas this just seems like Reacher's gonna punch through things, and we're all here for the ride. I also think that episode 7 had probably the weakest action of any of the episodes. Then coming off the strong action of episode 6, with the highway chase sequence and the stuff that happened in the yards, this episode 7, relied on most of their action taking place in a flashback. And unfortunately, the flashback just didn't have as much weight to it or strength to it because this story was no longer important. We were now in the penultimate episode. We need to speed along into whatever the crux is of this story. And for me, the action sequences just seem to be going down the route, the merit, the routine. Like, this is what we got to do. This is what we got to do. Part of this is this. in the first episode, I mean, the first season, Reacher was the only person who was fighting, and it was like, oh, we're watching this brute person versus the field. Whereas this episode or this season, we have four people. While Reacher is still the strongest of them all, but we have four people who all basically have the same fighting style. There is no real difference between them. Neely has the added benefit of being a sniper, so she can shoot better. But the rest of them, the fighting styles, they all can fight. And so it's a lot of just watching the routine of a fight as opposed to actually getting behind them, like, oh God, what's going to happen? And I think as a whole, because that episode ends with Dixon and OD being captured by Langston, and then Reacher sort of gives himself up, leaving Neely outside of this compound to sort of um, one, be sort of the ace in the hole that Reacher doesn't quite give up his whole thing to say that he gives Langston the idea that Neely's dead. So he leaves her outside to sort of until he gets the correct information. He said, I'm going to leave you out there as sort of a backup plan. He's also called in Lavoy, who was the person that pulled him into the sewers, and like, hey, you want to do a deal with me? I can help you out if you help me do this. It was the senator. So he calls them in to sort of cash in that chip, like, hey, I'm about to go do this. I need you to help. All of that felt really flat for me. It was an episode that I was like, I feel like there's so many things that you have to try to tie up that I don't know if you're going to have enough time to do so. Because AM also is in this episode. And he's just going around, still doing his thing, wheeling and dealing, killing people. He seems like he's going to be a big threat. And I feel like, I felt like, I know now, but I felt like at the time that AM would not have enough time to be a serviceable enough of a foe uh, because we're starting the episode off with Reacher captured by Langston. So we got to at least finish that story off before we get to AM. There's not going to be enough time to tie that together. I was correct. AM is basically an afterthought to the point where I'm like, oh, we could have just not had his character at all. Like, you built him up to be such a strategist, such a killer, that when we actually get to see him go mano a mano or face to face with Reacher, in this case, Reacher and the gang, it is sad how quickly it ends. This episode is called Flyboy. Reacher is trapped. He got the idea of taking a tack and putting in his rubber sole shoe to sort of bypass the electrical currents that are surrounding the gate. So he gets in there, he gives himself up, sees Dixon and Neely, and Langston is kind of he's doing the old villain trope of like, I'm going to tell you my story. I'm going to tell it all to you. There's nothing you can do about it because you're never going to get out of it. Yeah, ha, ha. You're never going to get away with it, Reacher. That's what's happening. But he doesn't want to kill Reacher because he wants to sort of tie up all loose ends. He doesn't want to have any loose ends whatsoever. And it's funny to me because there's a point in this, I'd say 5 minutes later, where he just says, screw the loose ends. Let's just get the money and get out of here, which is what I was thinking. Like, why do the loose ends matter? If you have as much money as you possibly can get with this transaction with AM and these weapons, 605 mil, once you get that point, who cares if you have a loose end? You can get to wherever you're at in the island, stick your toes in the sand, and you can send somebody for 1/50th of that amount, and your loose ends will get tied up. I promise you. But it's to the point where he shoots OD, and then he tells them, hey, get the bullet out of him because I don't want that to be used to tie back to us. And then the very next moment, he's like, after all, we got to get up out of here. This dude is serious. But what we do learn is that Swan was never dirty. Swan was cut in on the deal with Langston, and he refused to do it. There's a code that everybody on this team has, and he said, you are responsible for your man dying because he stuck to that code. And he asks where Swan is, and he tells him, oh, he's here. And he just shows in a jar an eyeball and a finger, which he said I kept so that I could sign off on things and then have retinal scans for things so that people would still believe that Swan is responsible for this, and I can kind of just go off into the sunset and hide in the background. Smart move. I don't know how much of a signature you can get with a finger. You can do fingerprint scans, but I'm not sure how much you can sign with just a finger and get the correct, whatever. Might have been a dialogue issue. They then transport Dixon and OD off to the helicopter. And they're going to do what they did at the beginning of the episode, where they try to just drop people out. The plan is also to do that with Reacher, but they said we're going to hold on Reacher until they get an idea where Neely is, because he's the only one who knows where she is at. But then Neely sees Dixon and OD about to board the helicopter, so she sort of takes matters into her own hands. She also hears the cavalry coming with the voice team. They're en route, and they said they're about 3 minutes out. So this all is sort of happening at the same time. Reacher manages to get free. They attack. She attacks the front guard, and basically mayhem ensues. And it's a pretty quick, um, underwhelming shootout, especially in comparison. If you remember the finale that occurred in season one, which was fantastic in the warehouse and everything, like it was beautiful, gorgeous, went on for a while. This is like you blink and you miss it, and I don't know if it's a budgetary thing. I don't know if this was like, hey, we're about to go into a strike. We got to shoot what we can. I'm not sure, but it was very underwhelming. Um, Shootout happens, and then Reacher has to go as Langston in a helicopter with Dixon and OD are going off into the air. As they're going off into the air, first moment where I kind of rolled my eyes is that Reacher runs out at the speed and weight that he is, kind of unbelievable. But he jumps up and grabs onto the wheel of the helicopter as it's rising into there. It's almost completely off the ground. He jumps up and he's holding on. He's holding on for dear life. This is when this episode goes into that that live for your die hard moment when once John McClane is like literally in a foot race with a jet plane, or in Fast Five when Toretto catches Letty over the street and you're like, oh, physics don't matter anymore. Got it. I wish I had gotten that note. And I wish it was more consistently that throughout. Because if it started off with him doing these crazy things, I'd have been like, all right, cool, I'm going to accept that. But season one was pretty grounded. Season two had moments of lapses of reality and what could actually happen with like Homeland saying, oh, you're going to go kill people? Cool. And things that logistically didn't make sense. But the physics of it all, outside of him being a larger man, didn't really come into question until this episode. The jumping on the wheel was one part of it. It gets even nuttier because while they're on this plane, a battle ensues. The back door is open as Langston is about to like start lodging Dixon and OD out. Reacher comes up, battle ensues, blah, blah, blah. The plane gets shot, so it starts having some turbulence going down. When that occurs, Dixon's gurney that she is strapped to starts flying out. Now, mind you, this is with gravity. Starts flying out of the back of the helicopter. And with his bare hand, Reacher reaches forward and grabs the gurney, and it stops, hanging out the helicopter. What the fuck? That is literally the moment that I was like, okay, what? I know Dixon weighs at least 105. We'll give her that. She's probably more than that. She's a taller woman, but she's at least 100, and that gurney has some weight to it. So with full speed, with gravity, and he's getting kicked in his ribs, got stabbed in one forearm. Mind you, not only does he grab it, he lets it go and then grabs it again. Sure. Okay. All right. Now I know where we're at and what the baseline is. So I know now that when season 3 occurs, he's going to be full on Dwayne Johnson in the Fast series and starts moving rockets and missiles with his bare hands. Like that's fully what I expect at this point. He throws Langston out. Pretty anticlimactic. Not a big fight sequence there. He throws Langston out of it, and then they coerce the helicopter person to tell them the meeting place of where they're going to meet AM. So they get the drop on AM again. Build up AM for 8 episodes of this bad man who's murdering people, bringing missiles, that he sort of treats himself as if, hey, I am the middleman. That is who I am. I don't have much of a dog in this fight. You want the person who I'm selling this to more than you want me. And then they just unload a clip on him and he's dead. So all of that buildup was for naught. They then go to the garage. They have the helicopter pilot still remaining, the engineer that was going to sort of put the chips into place and make sure that everything was up on the up and up. They both claim ignorance, like, hey, I ain't got nothing to do with this. They was going to pay me. They asked me to do some things. I did not know what they were doing it for or what they're using it for, so please let me go. And they're like, all right, cool, my bad. Go ahead. You can go ahead and free and go do your thing. They are ignorant enough to not see Neely holding a rocket launcher while they're running towards the helicopter, but they get to a point where they're going to clear residences, and then Neely fires off the rocket. We actually get to see the weapons in use and how what actually is intended for, but the rocket misses the helicopter and then targets back and comes back to it. And so it's kind of a failsafe. It can't fail. And it blows up the helicopter. So all the loose ends there are sort of taken care of. Mind you, they are there at this garage with the SWAT folks that came from Lavoie's team. So once the helicopter blows up, the voice team shows their true colors and like, hey, uh, sorry about this, no hard feelings, but we got to take you out. Lavoie's orders, we got to clean up. And Reacher's is like, well, I figured you guys were going to do this earlier. I didn't know you were going to give us a chance to actually blow up the rocket, but we cashed in our ships with Homeland, and so yeah, they're going to be here now. And they start pulling up, and then they call Lavoie, and Lavoie gets the drop on him because Homeland helps them out, which is fascinating to me. As Homeland, that is the place where he just straight up left there. It's like, oh, it's going to be great to bring in Matroud. He's like, no, 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 I'm going to kill this man. And like, Reacher. And then it happens again now because they ask, where's the money? And he's like, what money? And just walks away. And they don't do a thing about it. If that's what Homeland Security is like, they are terrible at their jobs. Reacher then goes and sort of becomes Robin Hood to many people, including folks on his team. He starts giving money out. He starts giving money to Swan's family. Starts giving family to another one. I forgot the other fallen member of his team, but he gives money to them. He gives money to some charities, some dog shelter charities, money to I'm sorry, to OD's family. So his kids, private schools, what are all taken care of for the future. Give stuff for Neely's dad so that he has round the clock medical care while he is on his last days. He basically gives Dixon her own business and says, you don't need to be working for anybody, you get your own thing. And he buys himself a toothbrush. That is what he does. But that money is sort of spent and all allocated. And not really, because it's unclear how much of this is spent. I feel like he took care of all of these things and then kept enough where, as we go along in the future seasons, he has money, but he doesn't really show it or flash it or use it. The one thing that he bought for himself was a bus pass that he can the year bus pass around the country, so he can go anywhere he wants to for an entire year without sort of having to worry about the day to day of it. And he sort of says his goodbyes to everybody. He has one more bang session with Dixon. Says goodbye to Neely, and Neely kind of checks him, saying, "Hey, look, we can't keep. You are a friend to me. You are a family to me, and you're somebody that I truly care about. You can't keep making the times that we see each other, one, by gunfight, but two, after so long of a time. I want to see you more." And I think it sort of registered to him as he got on the bus and sort of said that he was with family on this trip. This season was a much I did not appreciate or like nearly as much as I did season one. And I'm going to say this: had I watched had season two been my starter to this show and to this character, um, with Alan Richardson playing him, I would not have been so excited to see the next season. Like I wouldn't care. But Reacher season one was so good for me that I was like, oh, I'm in, and I'm still hooked enough based on that and pieces of that character that I just like, that I think I'm in for season three. I know they're making a season three. I do hope that we sort of go back to some of the basics where a team doesn't really fit what I want from Reacher so much. He's more of a solo man. Now, if he's working within the confines of the police that are in whatever city he's in, sure. Um, but having an entire unit with him, just I didn't care enough about them or want to care enough about them, where I think the story should be about Reacher and do more of the detective work. I think this season did the majority of the police work in the first 2 to 3 episodes, and the rest was just like, we're just going to do flashbacks and killing, and it lost a little bit of the rhythm of what I appreciated the most from season one of Reacher. I also don't think this season had one character as engaging or interesting as Finley was for the first season. Briscoe too, but I feel like Dixon sort of fit what Briscoe was bringing. But Finley, I just don't think there's anybody who sort of filled that balance of Reacher. Russo to an extent, but Russo was off was not involved with this team as much as the captain of the police was on that one. So for season two, it's a mixed bag. I much prefer season one of Reacher. Will I keep going for Reacher 3? Yeah, I mean they built in enough of a base with me, and they started off with a great enough of a blueprint at the beginning that I'm willing to stick around. I do just hope that we can get a little bit more clarity on how far fetched we're going to go. Are we going full fast 8 with Reacher, or are we kind of going to bring it back down to the basics of saying we're going to be a bare bones street level procedural cop show versus Hobbs on the streets? What did you guys think about this season as a whole of Reacher, but specifically these last 2 episodes? Leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. I will be doing the new True Detective as well. Probably will having that go up tomorrow, non-spoiler, and then spoilers starting Sunday afterwards. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.